Senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it has been nearly 6 weeks, 6 weeks, since Alex Preddy was killed by masked federal agents in broad daylight. It has been over 9 weeks since Renee Good was killed. And day after day, week after week, we have seen Americans brutalized by an out-of-control Department of Homeland Security. American citizens detained without cause, children ripped away from their families as this administration treats them like political pawns in their sick games. We have seen peaceful protesters have their windows broken in by untrained and unidentifiable agents. And we have seen more people get hurt and even die because of how ICE and Border Patrol have been conducting themselves. And this entire time, Democrats have been pushing for serious reform to rein in these agencies. For months, I have been at the table in good faith, pushing to secure basic accountability measures for ICE and Border Patrol. We are talking about standards local police already follow across the country, but even before Alex Preddy was shot and killed, Republicans and this White House in particular were telling us no on many basic reforms that would rein in ICE and CBP. We pushed for common sense steps to make sure that poorly trained agents and officers do not trample the basic rights of American citizens and kill them for no reason. And we pushed for steps to prevent these rogue agencies from hiding the facts from the public and sweeping everything under the rug. But my colleagues across the aisle came back to us and said, sorry, we cannot agree to those. Sometimes my Republican colleagues were willing to take one modest step or another, which I appreciated, only to have to come back and say the White House was not willing to do that and they had to hold the line. Or worse, they backtracked on measures we had agreed to because of fears of what the White House would think. And now, here we find ourselves, nearly 6 weeks after Alex Preddy's brutal killing, and Republicans so far have continued to refuse to join us to pass any common sense reforms to prevent more Americans from being hurt or even killed by masked federal agents. As I have said many times, we are not asking for the moon. We are asking for basic steps to protect Americans' constitutional rights and their safety. There is nothing new or controversial about body cameras or requiring identification be displayed. There is nothing extreme about insisting that ICE and Border Patrol follow the same standards as everyone else when it comes to use of force or needing a warrant before smashing in someone's door and dragging them away. These are common sense, and they are overwhelmingly popular. This is what the American people are demanding. But Republicans have decided they would rather shut down DHS than work with us to rein in these rogue agencies. Republicans know full well Democrats do want to ensure that TSA and CISA and FEMA and other important agencies are funded. What Democrats have a problem with is funding rogue agencies that are actively violating court orders and our civil rights and putting Americans' safety at risk. We will not cut a blank check funding without reforms for ICE and Border Patrol. But if Republicans keep dragging their feet on those basic reforms we're asking for to protect people from those rogue federal agencies, then we should at least make sure that TSA agents get paid and FEMA is fully funded while those negotiations continue. TSA agents should not go without pay because Republicans refuse to agree to common sense reforms instead of cutting another blank check for Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller to terrorize Americans. So yes, let's pay our Coast Guard and our TSA agents. Let's replenish the disaster relief fund and support other work that we overwhelmingly all agree on. I have a bill that I will offer in a moment that will do that, and we can pass it right now while pressing ahead with negotiations on ICE and Border Patrol to get basic reforms and accountability the American people want. All week, I have heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle loudly say Funding for DHS could not be more important in this moment. They have argued the instability this president has unleashed with his reckless war in Iran means Democrats must now fund DHS, including ICE, with no reforms at all. Now, there are some obvious problems with that argument, like the bizarre notion that because Trump started a reckless war with Iran, Democrats now must run and rush and cut an ICE blank check. Or the fact that the biggest threat to cyber and counterterrorism work at DHS seems to be Kristi Noem, who, by the way, over the last year has gutted CISA and has taken folks off the terrorism beat to deport farm workers with no criminal history. Well, put all that aside, I completely agree we should fund our Cyber Defense Agency and FEMA and TSA. So I hope my Republican colleagues who also believe, I know they do, that these agencies are important and who have been making the case that they do need funding will join with me today to get this bill passed, while talks on ICE and Border Patrol and much-needed reform and accountability measures can continue. So with that, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent. The Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of my bill, which is at the desk. The bill be considered, read 3 times, and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Senator from Alabama is recognized.
Reserving the right to object, I'd like a moment to respond to my colleague from Washington. Democrats claim they are no longer for open borders, yet they're now proposing to actually defund border security. Their proposal completely defunds the Customs and Border Protection, including Border Patrol. Now, year over year, fentanyl deaths are down 24% when you take overdoses of drug and fentanyl deaths, down 24% because of the good work of CBP. But you want to defund that. Why? Well, during the Biden administration, we hit a record high of overdoses. And do you know what the American people said? They said, no more. No more. We're sick of the failed Biden border policies. We expect the people who are elected to represent us to actually do that. And there are moms and dads that are sitting around their kitchen table, Mr. President, with a child who would not be here but for the courageous acts of CBP. But Democrats today say they want to defund that. Additionally, Mr. President, Democrats claim they are no longer the party of defund police. But yet today, they actually came here and asked to defund our law enforcement officers. Our law enforcement officers that do a multitude of things. Mr. President, they're asking to defund HSI today. Now, I heard the minority leader give a few remarks earlier, which I was glad to see him down here, and he talked about the need to protect children. I wish that the other side of the aisle had that level of conviction over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, when we lost over 500,000 kids to Joe Biden's failed border policies, on which this side of the aisle said nothing can be done with it unless we pass a law. There are no reforms that can stop this flow of border. There are no reforms that can get. They actually did away with the DNA policy to make sure that those kids went to someone that they were related to. Well, do you know what you're defunding? You're defunding the agency that has found 145 of those lost children. And I agree with my colleague from Washington that children should matter. When you think about what HSI does, they go find child predators. Put this up. HSI is responsible for capturing these men. And today, you've all decided that that's not worth funding. We're no longer going to go after people who are child pornographers, child predators, sex traffickers, drug traffickers. The worst of the worst is who HSI has found and gotten rid of. But today the Democrats came and said, We're not going to fund it. You're defunding ERO personnel who remove these transnational cartel members and violent criminals, and you're defunding CBP personnel. Look, it's very clear through their actions today, Mr. President, that they are still the party of open borders. They are still the party of defund the police, now actually more than ever. And you can't get more radical than that. That was actually rejected at the ballot box last November. But we know this couldn't come at a more dangerous time, Mr. President. We know when we saw what happened in Austin, there's an increased level of threat to our interior. And we know that in December 2025, that the director of National Counterterrorism Center testified that the U.S. had admitted over 18,000 known or suspected terrorists as part of Biden's parole program. So when you're looking at this, Mr. President, when you're looking at CBP, the fact in FY25 they got 4,800 known terrorists or terrorist suspects at the border, FY26, 3,950. We have work to do. We want to work with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We want to find a pathway forward. But it takes actually having conversations and working together to be able to do that. This is completely moving us in the wrong direction. It would endanger lives of our family and ultimately, Mr. President, the safety of our nation. And therefore, I object.
Since heard.
Mr. President, unfortunately, what has become very clear is that Republicans would rather keep the entire DHS shut down than work with Democrats to prevent more Americans from being killed by masked agents. My Democratic colleagues and I have been very, very clear on the reforms we need. It is not secret, and we have been pushing for them for weeks on end in good faith to finalize a DHS bill that funds TSA and FEMA while reining in ICE and CBP. But Republicans in the White House have now for months refused to agree to those basic reforms that we need to keep Americans safe. And they have said again and again that we need to fund FEMA and TSA and other key agencies. Well, I just tried to pass a bill that would make sure that those agencies are funded while talks on reforms and accountability measures for ICE and Border Patrol continue. So guess what? They blocked that too. Now, this is not complicated. Democrats want to get TSA officers paid and fund disaster relief. But we will not vote to help Republicans spend one more dime letting Stephen Miller terrorize our cities, and we will not vote to cut a blank check so that ICE can barge into Americans' homes without a warrant. We will not vote to allow ICE agents to continue wearing masks as they terrorize our communities and evade accountability. We need accountability for ICE and for Border Patrol. And it is not just Democrats saying that. The American people overwhelmingly agree that Trump and Noem's lawless rampage has got to come to an end. People feel that way because we have all seen what is happening. It is in plain sight. We've all seen the videos of people that are tackled and pepper sprayed in the face, of protesters who are gassed for no reason. We've seen the horrific shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and we have seen Kristi Noem, ICE, and Border Patrol blatantly lie and slander people like Renee and Alex and Miramar Martinez by falsely calling them domestic terrorists. What we have not yet seen is accountability. That is what has got to end. No amount of Republican revotes on the same failed bill is going to change that. And while our bill to fund the Coast Guard and TSA and FEMA as negotiations continue was just objected to. So, Mr. President, I am ready at any time to pass that. It is the right thing to do. Instead of blocking bills to pay TSA agents or wasting time with dead-on-arrival legislation, I hope that Republicans will listen to what we are asking for, listen to what their constituents are asking for, We need to see ICE have accountability and work with us to pass those reforms in order to fund that full agency. With that, I want my colleagues, I will continue to work to get that done.
Mr. President,
Senator from Alabama is recognized.
we would love to listen. That would be great. Because we passed a continuing resolution for 2 weeks, and to my knowledge, there were no conversations between elected Democrats and elected Republicans to try to find a pathway forward. And then in the last 2 weeks, we've been asking to have those conversations. So we've been asking to listen because we believe that this is important. So I am calling on my Democratic colleagues to be a part of that, to be a part of the solution. I certainly know that we want to. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed immediately to consideration of calendar number 156, H.R. 4553, and I ask that the Britt substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, and the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President? Mr. President?
Senator from Washington State.
Reserving the right to object. Look, I too am frustrated. This body has not been able to reach an agreement on the DHS funding bill. And in particular, I am frustrated that my colleagues across the aisle and in the White House are still refusing to agree and work with us on common sense measures to protect our constituents from being shot and even killed by unidentifiable, untrained ICE and Border Patrol agents. Democrats have been very clear on this for weeks. We want to fund FEMA and TSA, and we want to protect Americans from violence at the hands of rogue federal agencies. This is not complicated. We can and we must do both. But I've also been very clear about what we cannot do, which is cut another blank check for Kristi Noem to terrorize our communities. And unfortunately, that is what the bill from the junior senator from Alabama would do. It would kick the can down the road and give more money to ICE and Border Patrol to trample American rights. That is not an acceptable outcome, and if Republicans won't agree to the common sense measures we've been pushing for weeks, measures that police departments across America already adhere to, then I am absolutely willing and ready to fund the rest of DHS while talks on ICE and BPA continue. In fact, that is what the bill did that I just offered. So I object to this measure, and I really hope our Republican colleagues will join me to support the bill I called up a few moments ago to fund TSA and FEMA and CISA while those talks continue. So I object.
The objection is heard. Senate Majority Leader is recognized.
President, I move to proceed to the motion to reconsider the cloture vote from February the 12th on the motion to proceed to calendar number 311, H.R. 7147.
Question is on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? House Speakers have it. The motion is agreed to. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I move to reconsider the cloture vote on the motion to proceed to calendar number 311, H.R. 7147.
The question is on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the motion to vote cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 311, H.R. 7147, an act making further consolidated appropriations and so forth, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
Under the previous order, the mandatory quorum called under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to H.R. 7147, an act making further consolidated appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2026, and for other purposes shall be brought to a close upon reconsideration? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsop-Brooks, Ms. Baldwin. No. Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Barrasso, Blackburn, Bozeman, Budd, Capito, Collins, Crapo, Cruz, Daines, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Haggerty, Hoven, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Kennedy, Lummis, Marshall, McCormick, Marino, Paul, Ricketts, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, Sheehy, Wicker, and Young. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. McConnell, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Baldwin, Cantwell, Durbin, Gillibrand, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Kane, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Markey, Ossoff, Padilla, Peters, Reed, Rosen, Schatz, Schiff, Shaheen, Smith, Warner, Warren, Welch, and Wyden. Mr. Langford, aye. Ms. Hirono, no. Mr. Tillis, aye. Mr. Sanders, no. Mr. Lee, aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Warnock, no. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Lujan, no. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mr. Fetterman, aye. Mrs. Murray, Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Schumer, no. Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Kelly, no. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Curtis, aye. Mr. Murphy, Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. Gallego, no. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Justice. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Mullen.
Well, I don't know.
Aye.
I don't know.
Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Van Hollen, no.
Are we ready for this? Okay. On this vote, the yeas are 51, the nays are 45. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative, the motion upon reconsideration is not agreed to. Thank you.
I'm going to call you later on. Madam President.
Recognized.
Your mic wasn't on. What did you call me? What was the name?
The gentleman
Thank you.
from New Jersey
I truly appreciate the presiding officer. I hope that was recorded by the stenographer that the presiding officer called me a gentleman. Thank you very much. To my colleagues in the Senate, to the Senate President, to all those assembled here, I'm rising to give this speech. I feel such privilege because I get to recognize someone whose work most Americans never see, but whose contribution is woven into the very history of this institution. When a senator comes to the floor to speak, whether it's daily routine address or a moment that will echo through generations, there is always someone standing just off camera, often unnoticed, a stenograph machine hanging from their neck, capturing every word we say. They record our arguments and our aspirations, our disagreements and our dreams, our long speeches and sometimes our longer ones. The dozens of people who are watching C-SPAN may not realize it, but the words spoken in this chamber simply don't float away into the air. They are preserved faithfully, meticulously, by extraordinary professionals who ensure that the congressional record becomes the living memory of the United States Senate and our nation. For those of you who do not know about these extraordinary stenographers, their work is not easy. It requires years of training, immense focus and concentration, and a remarkable command of language and speed and accents that range from a Southern Texas accent to a Jersey one. And it requires a hell of a lot of patience. Because as everyone in this chamber knows, brevity is not always the defining virtue of the United States Senate. Yet, through late nights, historic votes, moments of celebration, and moments of national grief, Senate stenographers have stood quietly at their posts, ensuring that what happens here is captured for the American people and preserved in American history for generations yet to come. Today, I want to recognize one of the very best of them. Today, I want to recognize Carol Darche. Carol has spent more than 45 years as a court reporter, bringing her extraordinary skill to the Senate floor to record some of the most consequential moments in our nation's history. Through long sessions, overnight debates, and pivotal moments in our country, Carol has been there, steadfast, precise, and deeply committed to this institution. It would be an exaggeration to say the lights of this chamber, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the lights of this chamber have shone a little bit brighter because of her presence. What has always struck me about Carol is not just her professionalism, but the spirit she brings to her work. Day after day, she arrives with warmth and enthusiasm and a quiet pride in serving something larger than herself. And the dedication required is extraordinary. Each session week, Carol boards the Amtrak from New Jersey to Washington, listening to her audiobooks along the way, traveling hundreds of miles that would make even Joe Biden be a little bit jealous, to stand on the floor and serve the American people. This kind of commitment to public service, to this institution of the United States Senate, and to the preservation of our democratic record is something we should all aspire to. Now, while we will deeply miss Carol, and I am sure I speak for my 99 colleagues, we will miss her in the Senate, I must admit that I am delighted that her retirement will take her back home to the great state of New Jersey, where she plans to enjoy the Jersey Shore with her husband, Fred, her 3 stepchildren, and her 5 grandchildren. She also plans to travel to Paris, to Portugal, and beyond. And I have no doubt that the same spirit of curiosity and joy that she brought to this building will accompany her on those adventures. Carol, the Senate will miss you. We will miss your warmth. We will miss your enthusiasm for this institution. And yes, we'll miss hearing about you, witnessing your humanity, seeing every day the truth that it is leaders in the Senate, often that don't stand in the spotlight, who don't face the camera. It is leaders in the Senate like you that make this institution function for the American people. Carol, that's what patriotism is. It's not seen often in one flash or one flourish. Patriotism is steadfast dedication to serving this nation day in and day out. And what does your service render? I've come to learn that the congressional record is more than ink on paper. It is the story of our democracy. And for decades, you have helped to ensure that that story was captured with precision, care, and integrity. For that, the United States Senate and the nation and every one of the members of this body owe you gratitude. Carol, thank you for your extraordinary years of service. May your retirement be filled with family, with travel, with laughter, with yoga, and many beautiful sunsets along the incredible Jersey Shore. The truth is, you will be leaving this chamber, but the history you helped preserve here, your contributions will endure for generations. Madam President, I yield the floor as I give tribute to another great member of this body who herself is yielding this floor and saying her farewell. Thank you very much, Madam President. Do I need to notice the absence of a quorum or no? We're good.
Are we good?
It's up to me. I have so much power. I would like to note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Osterbrooks.
Madam President.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, is the Senate presently in a quorum call?
We are.
May I ask unanimous consent that that quorum call be vitiated?
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. It was the spring of 2019. Public and media interest in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report into Russia's election interference operation reached a fever pitch. There had been a steady drip, drip, drip of reporting on the Trump team's cozy and peculiar relationship with Russia since his surprise election victory in 2016. Ahead of the Mueller report's release, Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, issued a letter to Congress purporting to summarize the report's findings. The letter declared that Russia and the Trump campaign did not collude to steal the election. The press, ravenous for any news of the long-anticipated Mueller report's conclusion, largely accepted Attorney General Barr's narrow, carefully worded conclusion. And not yet having access to the full report, blasted the Attorney General's summary around the world. Trump himself declared, all caps, no collusion. He said he had been cleared of the Russia hoax, a term he reserves only to describe things that are true, like climate change. Frustrated, Mueller wrote to Barr that the Attorney General's letter did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of the investigation. But by the time the dense, voluminous Mueller report was issued, the month after Barr's letter, its message had been obscured. The Mueller report actually concluded that the Trump campaign knew of and welcomed Russian interference and expected to benefit from it. That conclusion was later echoed and reinforced by an investigation led by then-Chairman Marco Rubio's Senate Intelligence Committee, a bipartisan report. But Barr's scheme had largely worked. Many in the media and in the Democratic Party seemed to internalize that the Russia speculation had perhaps gotten out of hand and that perhaps we had been wrong to believe there was a troubling connection between Trump and Russia after all. But were we? Let's take a look at a sampling of what Trump has done for Russia just lately, and usually at the expense of American interests. There are many, but here's a top 10. 1, after Trump and Vice President Vance theatrically chastised the heroic Ukrainian President Zelensky in front of TV cameras in the Oval Office last year, Trump paused our weapons shipments to Ukraine. 2, in July, during the worst Russian bombing campaign of the war until that point, Trump paused an already funded weapons shipment for Ukraine, including the Patriot interceptors that protect civilians from Putin's savage attacks. 3, that same month, Trump's Treasury Department stopped imposing new sanctions and closing sanctions loopholes, effectively allowing dummy corporations to send funds, chips, and military equipment to Russia. Leaked phone calls show that White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev have worked together closely behind the scenes on a peace deal favorable to Russia. 5. Last summer, Trump rolled out the presidential red carpet for the Russian dictator on American soil, with a summit in Alaska that yielded, unsurprisingly, no gains toward ending the war in Ukraine. 6. Trump's vice president traveled to the Munich Security Conference last year to parrot Russia's anti-Western talking points, pushed by right-wing groups that Putin has long funded and used to create political strife in Europe. 7. Trump installed Russia apologist Tulsi Gabbard as his director of national intelligence, much to the glee of Russian state media. 8. Upon the confirmation of Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Department of Justice shuttered its anti-kleptocracy work that had successfully targeted Putin's Russian oligarchs. 9. Late last year, Trump unveiled a new so-called national security strategy, which abandoned traditional alliances in Europe and favored a transactional foreign policy that the Kremlin praised as, quote, largely consistent with Moscow's vision and desires. And 10, the Trump administration is even paving the way for Russia's return to global